I grew up in a house where my presence didn't matter. My parents, Linda and Richard, lived for my older sister, Claire. Her laughter filled every room. Her achievements were celebrated, her happiness worshipped. And me? I became invisible, a shadow drifting through hallways no one noticed, a whisper in a house that didn't hear me. I existed only in the margins. School offered no escape. I worked quietly, never asking for help, because help had always been a sting. When Claire won awards, I applauded silently. When she fell or struggled, I stayed out of the way. My successes were ignored, my failures, inconvenient. I learned early that independence was my only ally. Asking for attention was pointless. Being invisible was safer. Being invisible was survival. Then one gray winter morning, everything changed. A letter arrived from a lawyer in Oregon. My great-uncle, a man I barely remembered from a photograph, had died, leaving me his entire estate. A fortune I had never imagined. Suddenly, I had the power to step out of the shadows, to carve a life that was mine and mine alone. The irony was delicious. For years, I had been unseen, and now I could command a space that demanded notice. I found Ravenwood Manor online. Towering stone walls, ivy crawling over its facade, perched atop cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The fog rolled in like a shroud, hiding the mansion from the world. Isolation. Silence. Freedom. I bought it without hesitation, my name alone etched on the deed. For the first time, I belonged somewhere entirely, completely, irrevocably. The first week was intoxicating. I wandered through endless halls, the marble floors cool beneath my feet. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, catching the dust like floating stars. Each room whispered of old wealth, of lives long past, but most importantly, of a space that was finally mine. I could breathe. I could think. I could exist without apology. But Ravenwood had its own pulse. Doors I had closed were ajar the next morning. A book I left on the coffee table appeared atop the grand piano. A faint scent of roses drifted down corridors, even though winter had claimed the garden. I told myself it was imagination, a trick of silence, a house settling. But deep inside, I knew something else was stirring, something alive, watching, waiting. I explored every nook, every shadowed corner. One evening, I discovered a hidden panel behind the library bookshelf. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, written in my great-uncle's elegant hand. They spoke of family betrayals, secrets, and warnings. Ravenwood is alive, one letter read. It chooses its heir. It protects the lonely and punishes the unworthy. My heart pounded. My inheritance came with conditions I had never imagined. The days slipped into nights, and I felt a strange intimacy with the house. It became my companion, my confidant, my judge. I whispered my thoughts aloud, half expecting them to be heard, and somehow, they felt, acknowledged. Ravenwood was more than stone and wood. It was a presence, demanding respect, granting solitude, and revealing truths. I had never felt so seen, or so tested. And then, the first real warning came, not from the house, but from my own blood. A letter, slipped under my door. No return address. In my handwriting. I checked, but my hand bore no mark. The words were simple, chilling, do not be alone. Fear pricked my skin. Was it the house? Or someone else, watching me through its walls? The isolation that had promised freedom now held a whisper of danger. I stayed up that night, wandering halls, trying to understand Ravenwood's intentions. Every creak of wood, every flicker of candlelight, every shadow stretching across the ornate ceilings felt deliberate, as if the house itself was alive, waiting for me to prove my worth. And in that silence, I realized that my past, my parents, my invisibility, they were all shadows, but here, in Ravenwood, I was finally visible. The question was, at what cost? For the first time, I understood fear and exhilaration in the same breath. The freedom I had fought for all my life came with an intensity one had never expected. Ravenwood would demand more than silence. It demanded presence, attention, and a confrontation with the truths I had buried. And I was ready. I had to be. Little did I know, the greatest test, and the most shocking twist of all, was yet to come. My parents, the ones who never saw me, would soon appear, and Ravenwood would make us confront everything we had ignored, everything we had hidden, everything we were afraid to face. Ravenwood's solitude had been intoxicating, until the night the footsteps began. I woke to a soft echo across the marble floors, slow and deliberate. My heart raced. I checked every room, yet no one was there. The shadows stretched unnaturally, and the house seemed to breathe around me. I told myself it was the wind, the settling of old wood. But deep down, I knew something was awake. I started keeping a journal, recording every anomaly. Doors left open that I had closed. A book on the coffee table, now perched atop the mantel. Faint scents of jasmine in the hall, even though the garden outside was frost-bound. Each detail sharpened my awareness. I could no longer pretend Ravenwood was merely a house. It had a consciousness, a will of its own, and it was testing me. One evening, I discovered a small door behind the study's curtain, almost invisible against the dark wood paneling. Curiosity drew me in. Inside was a narrow staircase spiraling downward. At the bottom, I found a chamber lit by a single flickering lantern. The walls were lined with old portraits, faces that seemed to watch my every move. Among them, I saw my great-uncle's eyes, sharp and knowing. Stacks of letters littered the floor, yellowed with age. As I read them, I realized that my great-uncle had chronicled generations of family neglect, greed, and obsession. One line burned into my mind: Ravenwood feeds on solitude, yes, but it also senses those who hide their pain. It rewards the unseen, punishes the unworthy. I shivered. The house was more than bricks and mortar. It was alive, and it had chosen me. For the first time, I felt the weight of inheritance not just as wealth, but as responsibility. Then, as though the universe had timed it perfectly, the front door creaked open. My parents were standing there, Linda and Richard. Older, haggard, anxious, and entirely human in a way I had never seen them before. My breath caught. After years of neglect, of erased presence, they were here. And they were afraid. "Emily, you can't stay here alone," my mother said, voice trembling. "The house, it knows things. It watches. It reacts." My father's hands shook as he stepped forward. "It feeds on loneliness, and it's dangerous. You shouldn't be here." I wanted to slam the door, to let them feel the emptiness they had handed me for years. But something, curiosity, defiance, maybe a flicker of hope, made me let them in. Almost immediately, the mansion seemed to respond. Candles flickered, shadows swirled, and the air felt heavy with expectation. Ravenwood wasn't just observing, it was testing all of us at once. They told me stories of the house, fragments from their past visits as children, secrets passed down they had never shared. I realized then, they weren't concerned with my safety, they were afraid of what I might uncover. And yet, their fear was real. As we spoke, a chill moved through the corridors. Paintings shifted slightly. The faint scent of roses returned, stronger this time. I knew the house had accepted their presence into its domain, and it was evaluating each of us. Days turned into tense nights. My parents and I moved cautiously through the rooms, each corner a test. A chandelier swayed without wind. Floorboards creaked beneath feet no one had placed there. A mirror reflected not one, but two figures behind me, though I knew I was alone. I started to question my sanity, but Ravenwood's intelligence was undeniable. It was orchestrating everything to see how I would react, how we would react as a family. And then the first real confrontation occurred. A door slammed violently, trapping my parents and me in the library. The portrait's eyes seemed to follow us, judging. My mother grabbed my hand, pleading. You have to listen, Emily. The house, it chooses, and if it decides, it won't let go. My father added, his voice breaking, we tried to warn you. It's never just the house, it's what the house reveals. Family secrets, long buried, it brings them all to light. Ravenwood was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a crucible. And the question that haunted me was not whether the house was alive, but what it would demand in exchange for our survival. For the first time in my life, I realized being seen was not the same as being safe. The house had recognized me, my parents, our histories. It was exposing every lie, every betrayal, every hurt. And in its silence, it whispered the one truth I could not ignore: the past does not remain buried. It waits, patient, until the moment it can be reckoned with. We spent the night huddled in the grand hall, listening to Ravenwood's breathing, the subtle groan of wood, the flicker of lights, the shifting of shadows. My parents clung to Ravenwood had been testing us for days, but the real truth was about to surface. I had begun to understand that the house didn't merely respond to our presence, it reflected our family's history, every secret, every betrayal, every lie we had hidden from one another. And it had chosen this moment to force us to confront it. It started subtly at first. My mother, Linda, confessed stories she had buried for decades, how she had favored Claire, how she had overlooked me, and how guilt had eaten at her silently. My father, Richard, admitted to moments of quiet cruelty disguised as discipline, actions I had repressed. I listened, heart pounding, anger and disbelief colliding with a strange empathy. Ravenwood demanded honesty, and it delivered it with a force I could not deny. Then, the first violent sign appeared. A gust of wind swept through the hall, slamming doors shut. The windows rattled. Candle flames leapt, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The portraits seemed to move, their painted eyes following us, whispering accusations. Ravenwood was alive, and it was no longer patient. It wanted the truth, and it wanted action. The past could no longer be ignored. I discovered a hidden room behind the grand staircase. Inside were hundreds of photographs, letters, and journals, family memories meticulously catalogued over generations. Among them, I found a photograph of myself as a child, alone on the stairs, looking scared. My parents were standing nearby, smiling, unaware of the neglect they had inflicted. The house had preserved every memory, every slight, every shadow of pain. It was holding us accountable. And then came the revelation that shattered any illusions of family unity. My parents had returned not to protect me, but to claim part of the fortune. Their urgency, their fear, it was not solely about the house. They had realized that Ravenwood did not just shelter me, it could reveal them, expose their failings to the world. Their love, or what I had believed to be love, was entangled with greed, and the house would not allow lies to survive. I confronted them. You came here for yourselves, not me, I said, voice trembling but steady. Their faces turned pale. My mother's eyes welled with tears, but my father's remained hard. We came to warn you, he insisted, but even he could not hide the tension, the self-interest lurking behind every word. Ravenwood seemed to lean closer, as if listening, approving of my clarity. The house intensified. Furniture shifted without contact. The chandeliers above swayed violently, and the shadows on the walls took forms of our past selves, replaying moments of neglect, selfishness, and betrayal. I felt a hand brush my shoulder, but no one was there. The air was thick with a presence that was patient yet unforgiving. Ravenwood had made us confront not only the house but each other. It became clear that survival required more than honesty. The house demanded repentance, understanding, and sacrifice. My parents, confronted with their misdeeds, began to break down. My mother wept, acknowledging the years she had denied me. My father's voice cracked, admitting every harsh word, every favoritism, every failure to see me. I realized that forgiveness might be possible, but only if Ravenwood allowed it. And I knew the house was always watching, judging, and waiting. Night fell, but Ravenwood did not sleep. Its halls whispered, its doors groaned, and the portraits glared. Shadows stretched unnaturally, forming shapes I could not immediately identify. In one, I saw my childhood self, hidden behind a curtain, watching my parents, yearning for their attention. Ravenwood had brought the past to life, forcing us to face what we had avoided for decades. By the early hours of the morning, my parents were exhausted, broken, and humbled. I, too, felt the weight of generations pressing down, the knowledge that the mansion would never let me forget who I was, where I came from, or what I had endured. Ravenwood was no longer just a home, it was a mirror, reflecting not only our physical presence but our moral and emotional truths. It demanded clarity, honesty, and acknowledgement of pain. As dawn approached, I realized something terrifying yet liberating. The house would never let the past remain hidden. It had tested us, revealed us, and now, it awaited our next choices. Forgiveness was possible, but Ravenwood had made it clear, redemption comes at a cost, and those who are not honest, who hide behind silence, will never leave unscathed. I understood then that I had inherited more than a mansion. I had inherited a living, sentient judge of my family's soul, and it would demand the truth until every secret was unearthed. I looked at my parents, at the people who had ignored me my whole life. And for the first time, I realized that the house had given me power. Power to see, to confront, to demand accountability. And Ravenwood was watching, silent, patient, knowing that the real test was far from over. Dawn broke over Ravenwood, but the mansion was far from quiet. Its walls had witnessed every secret, every betrayal, every tear. For the first time, my parents and I understood the magnitude of what we were facing. The house was no longer testing us, it was demanding a reckoning. My parents had confessed, admitted their neglect, their favoritism, their failures as human beings. I had listened, felt the sting of truth, and recognized their fragility. But Ravenwood demanded more. It required action, not just words. The house pulsed, and I could feel its presence in my chest, in my fingertips, in every step I took across its marble floors. It was alive, watching, and waiting. Then the shadows shifted violently. The portrait's eyes glowed faintly, and whispers filled the hall, repeating every harsh word my parents had spoken, every slight I had endured. I realized that the mansion did not merely reflect our past, it amplified it. Our mistakes, our fears, our regrets, they became tangible, pressing against us, forcing acknowledgement. I made a decision. If Ravenwood demanded truth, I would give it willingly. I stood in the grand hall, facing my parents. "We are here, all of us," I said firmly. "No more hiding, no more silence. If the house wants truth, we will give it. But we will survive it together." My voice echoed against the stone walls, and for a moment, the mansion seemed to still, as though considering my words. Then the final test began. The floor beneath us trembled, and a hidden door in the hall creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. My parents hesitated, fear clear in their eyes. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, urging them to follow. The air grew cold, and a faint light glowed below, illuminating the secrets Ravenwood had buried for decades. Inside, we found a chamber filled with mirrors, each reflecting a different moment of our lives. I saw myself as a child, small and unseen. I saw my parents, blind to my suffering. I saw every betrayal, every omission, every act of neglect. But I also saw moments of love, fleeting and fragile, moments they hadn't realized had mattered. Ravenwood had gathered every fragment of our existence, offering a final judgment. I spoke, not to my parents, but to the house. We acknowledge the past. We accept the pain. We are ready to move forward, but we will not let it consume us. The mirrors shimmered, and the shadows began to recede. The whispers faded, replaced by a calm, almost approving silence. Ravenwood had tested us, and we had faced it together. My parents fell to their knees, exhausted, humbled, their faces wet with tears. I knelt beside them, the years of anger and resentment still raw, but tempered by understanding. I realized then that Ravenwood's power was not malevolent, it was revealing, clarifying, forcing us to confront truths we had ignored. For the first time, I saw my parents truly, and for the first time, I saw myself reflected in their eyes. As we rose, the mansion seemed to breathe with us, its pulse steady and welcoming. The house that had been a crucible, a test, a mirror, now felt like a sanctuary, not of isolation, but of reconciliation. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was a promise. We had survived the reckoning, and in doing so, we had glimpsed the possibility of a different future. Yet, Ravenwood was never fully at rest. Even as the sun rose over the cliffs, a subtle vibration ran through the floors, a whisper in the corridors, a reminder that the house remembered everything. It had judged us, and it had released us, but only for now. Some doors, once opened, could never truly be closed. I looked at my parents, exhausted but alive, and realized that I had inherited more than a mansion. I had inherited clarity, awareness, and the ability to command my existence. Ravenwood had taught me that visibility comes at a cost, but it also brings power. And I was ready to live, fully, openly, and without fear. As we stepped into the sunlight, leaving the shadows of the past behind, I knew one thing with certainty: Ravenwood had changed us forever. And as its towers loomed above, silent but vigilant, I whispered a promise to the house, and to myself, that we would honor its lessons, face our truths, and never again allow the shadows to dictate our lives.